racist field trip I have ever been on in my fucking life. They took us to a fucking cotton processing place. And there was a big ass cotton field out in the middle of fucking Raymond, Alabama, in the south of Montgomery County. We went there, and me and 28 other little nigglets in Miss Harper's 3rd grade classroom, they took our asses out there in the middle of the fucking August heat and said, hey, y'all, they gave us bags and shit, like little cute little plastic bags with a cotton puff person with a smile on his face, and they're like, hey, y'all go out there, have fun, pick as much cotton as you want. And so my stupid ass went, I went. My mama signed off on it and didn't think about it, and I went to the fucking field trip. Out there in the field just having a good old time. We were singing songs and shit in the middle of the motherfucking field, picking goddamn cotton in the middle of the fucking heat. And then, I'm thinking, because it's a field trip, they told us you can pick as much as you want. Hey, you get to keep the fucking cotton. You can keep it. So I was like, yeah, I'm going to keep it. And we go to get back on the bus. They're like, all right, kids, turn your bags in. And they take our asses inside and took all the damn cotton that we had and then told us to get back on the fucking bus. So me being a little rebel, I took a handful of cotton, stuffed it in my pocket, and went home. Then my mama came when she was doing laundry the next night. She was like, what the fuck, is this cotton in your back pocket? I was like, yeah, where the hell did you get unprocessed raw cotton from? Well, yesterday on that field trip, they took us to a cotton processing plant, and we got to pick cotton all day long. My mama came to the school, and I swear to God, that shit went down. She locked this woman in a room like, how dare you jive-ass motherfuckers take my kids and all these other ashy little Negroes to a fucking cotton field in the middle of the summer. You fucking soulless bitch. She fucking checked me out of school. I didn't go to school for 3 days behind that shit. She said, I don't want to have to look at that bitch. She was pissed at everybody. Yes, that was the most racist shit I've ever gone through in my life. I didn't even understand what was wrong until the next year. I didn't even understand. I just thought we were just gonna go have some fun in the field. So fuck that shit. That was fucking sharecropping if I ever seen it. Fuck that shit.
Look away, look away, look away, Dixieland, 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 Dixieland.
All right, y'all, thank you for tuning in to Dixieland and the Proletariat. We're going to talk about Southern working class history and current events through a leftist perspective. Make sure to like us on social media at Dixieland and the Proletariat or Dixie Prol. And if you want to give your wages to a bunch of rednecks, then subscribe to our Patreon page at patreon.com/DixieProl. Got a lot of cool stuff to give you, including CDs, stickers, a cookbook, Discord server, Twitch stream, and exclusive episodes. We also have a Spotify playlist with some great artists you also check out. This podcast is brought to you by Camel Silver's Vaping, Living at Home, Pushing People in the Swamps, Yankee Liberals Thinking the South is a Racist Backwater, and Black Sharecroppers with Guns Proving Them Otherwise. Shout out to our new Patreon subscribers, Trey, Corey, Paw Timer, and Prescott. Our monthly Patreon surplus goes to groups that are run by and or help marginalized people directly. As always, I'm Nelson with...
I'm Wilford Brimley. And my diabetes made me racist.
Okay, starting early. Kai's here.
I'm Nelson.
The gang's all here. Tyler's like the cool side of me that I wish I had. Like if I had a cool / kind of evil twin, it'd be Tyler.
Am I your Tyler Durden?
You're my yes. Oh my God, you're my Tyler Durden. Oh my, you're my toxic side. But now you're like less. Now you're like probably a lot less toxic and probably less toxic than I am. So I'm your Tyler Durden.
But see, I've already done way worse shit than you could ever think of. Now,
yeah,
so, I mean,
so it'd be like Tyler Durden if Tyler Durden. I don't know. You're my Tyler. Well, I don't know. I just feel blah today. But we're talking about something that I've wanted to talk about for a long time, and that's the Alabama Communist Party and the Sharecroppers Union. Yay!
Finally made it to Hammer and Hoe.
We finally made it to Hammer and Hoe and a few other sources. So basically, I'm just
teasing it for like a year.
I know, right?
No,
So
this was supposed to be episode number 2.
yeah, this
Okay,
was.
so a year and a half at this point.
This is a part of a paper I wrote in my Southern politics class. So I got mostly Hammer and Hoe with some other sources that
What
I
grade
can
did you get on
list
it?
off. I got a B- in the class. I mean, I got a B+ in the class overall. I don't know what I got on the paper. He didn't send me a grade for it.
Why didn't you get the paper of the dude who got an A, or the person?
I probably should have. It probably was. I don't know. It was probably something really lame because I know the topics were kind of lame, and mine was the coolest.
Not everybody wrote on the same topic.
No. Not everyone's as cool as me or actually knew about this.
So we're getting a B grade version.
You are. You're probably getting the horrible. Actually, you know what? I'm really jealous because Valley Labor Report actually had the author Robin Kelly on their radio broadcast.
Now that's an A+ paper.
That is an A+ paper because you got the actual author on the show.
Yeah.
That's because we're the B grade podcast, so we get the B grade paper of just Nelson reading what he wrote in 2013 instead of having the author on.
Oh man, yeah. I hope everyone's doing well. Yay! I don't know.
We haven't done another episode in a minute or two, have we?
It's been a minute or two. Tommy's got the streaming angle going down perfectly. He looks like a professional streamer right now.
Nice.
Tyler looks like he's about to rob me.
He doesn't even say anything about it.
Say anything. He's just like, I mean, yeah.
I mean, honestly, Tyler, if you were black, I would call you a thug.
Well, just call me a school shooter then.
Oh, there we go.
All right, y'all. So basically what I'm going to do is I'm going to try and read through most of this and give my best impersonation of Kai when it comes to doing this. I can't read as well as you. So I'm probably going to stumble over words.
Did you hear my presentation, Nelson?
Are you
just gonna go the entire
that's
time?
basically it. Have you heard me try to read? Vocabulary is my Achilles heel. So I'm gonna try and power through this. I don't want to do it in 2 episodes. So I hope this works out. Ask questions along the way if you want. So yeah, without further ado, if y'all want to mute it up, I'll get started and just chime in. Obviously, as a white leftist, I know I'm speaking. I know a lot about this topic, and Tommy should not talk about it, even though he is the one black voice on the podcast.
As a liberal, I know that it's not my time, it's not my place. This is your moment. You guys take it.
Hey, this sounds like that other podcast we were on.
Oh my God. Anyway. All right. Robin Kelly said, I was not prepared for characters like Lemon Johnson, a former member of the communist-led Sharecroppers Union. While visiting Johnson in December of 1986 in a rural part of Montgomery, Alabama, author Robin Kelly was told many stories about how poor black sharecroppers organized their union. He told me about the 1935 cotton pickers strike, Stalin's pledge to send troops to Mobile to help black sharecroppers if things got out of hand. And probably the most shocking thing Kelly learned about this ordeal is when he asked Johnson, how did this all come about? How was the union able to win such demands? Johnson, without the slightest hesitation, Kelly writes, pulled out a heavily dog-eared copy of Lenin's What Is to Be Done and a box of shotgun shells and placed them firmly on the bed. Johnson then says what will become the running theme of the Sharecroppers Union in their plight. Right there, theory and practice. That's how we did it, theory and practice. When one thinks of Alabama during the Great Depression, communism is probably not something that comes to mind. One tends to think of poverty, pestilence, racism, white supremacy, cotton fields, and a land almost destined to never let go of its past. While this might be true, there is a side of Alabama's history that is one of labor unions, radical politics, and section of the population who yearned for change. One of these groups was the poor black sharecroppers of the Black Belt. And out of their desperation came the SCU, or the Sharecroppers Union. This union, like many other trade and industrial unions, came together in order to collectively bargain for better wages, working conditions, and for a better livelihood for its members. However, with unionization comes pushback, and as we will see time and time again, this resulted in violent repression. This was not only due to anti-labor sentiments in Alabama, but also anti-communism and racism, the latter running deep through the South's history. So why would these sharecroppers believe forming a union was necessary? The answer lies in the old saying, there's strength in numbers. When it came to the practice of sharecropping, The tenets of organizing are much like those of any labor force. The individual sharecroppers, on their own, faced many challenges, the biggest one being white supremacy. While trying to negotiate each new farming season, many tactics were used by the white landowners to intimidate the black sharecroppers. Most contracts were verbally secured only by a handshake, which had an advantage for the white landowners because if they wanted to go back on their word, they could just say the sharecropper was lying, and the racist law enforcement departments would believe them. Blackmail sharecroppers were mostly illiterate, which, if anything was written down, was used to the white owners' advantage. Sometimes, using more nefarious ways, the white landowners would send their wives to negotiate new contracts with blackmail sharecroppers. This is particularly cruel because it served as a subtle notion that if the sharecropper needed to comply with anything the landowner's wife demanded. If not, she would claim the sharecropper looked at her or touched her in an inappropriate way, which would mean serious, if not deadly, repercussions for the sharecropper and his families. All these practices, as well as many others, were the reasons why black sharecroppers demanded change. But why the communists? Why would black sharecroppers in Alabama side and eventually join a movement and subsequent organizations that was so foreign to the understanding of America and her values? Beginning in the 1920s and 1930s, the Soviet Union was perplexed by the workers of America. They had a Communist Party of America that was gaining ground in the northern part of the country and growing as a movement. But there was one issue that Lenin himself pointed out, and that was that the party was overwhelmingly white. In order to find out why this was, the Communist Party USA set up offices in the South, with the 17th District office making its home in Birmingham, Alabama. There, they tried to organize workers in the steel industry, but ran into the problem that had plagued organizers for decades: racism. During this time, leadership of the Soviet Union changed, and Joseph Stalin cemented his leadership over the nation. However, being from the smaller nation of Georgia, Stalin took interest in the black population of America as it pertained to the national question. This is the official party line on what constitutes a suppressed nationality and the right to self-determination. Having determined that the black population in the South represented a repressed nationality, the Soviet Union ordered the American Party to begin organizing them in the best way possible. The Southern Worker was established as the newspaper for CPUSA in the South and began printing issues to distribute amongst the workers. This set off a spark that ignited a movement when letters and stories from black sharecroppers throughout the South came in detailing the horrors of working conditions and racism. So basically, like I said, we have a group of marginalized people and black sharecroppers. We have a Communist Party that has a foothold in the South, and we have the Comintern that wants to promote not just equality, but self-determination for marginalized people. We have traditional trade unions, along with the Socialist Party, unwilling to work with the group. I'll get into that later. The theory here is that desperate people will look to whoever will help them, and that was the Communist Party. Logically, one would argue that they were the means, the motive, and the willingness for black sharecroppers to align themselves with the Communist Party to achieve equality and a better way of life. This motivation to work with the communists was so strong that members were willing to die in order to organize. Then again, what choices did what did the sharecroppers have to lose? They were threatened with racial violence daily. They were in a cycle of debt that they could not get out of, and no one else was willing to help them in ways that truly improved their lives. So basically, with this paper and this podcast episode, I'm going to show how all these things came together to show that during the Depression, the Sharecroppers Union was run and led by black sharecroppers, and they met most of their goals of collective bargaining and economic relief. When talking about why workers would join a union, especially one as radical as the SCU, we must look at the conditions that these sharecroppers faced. Kelly writes that sharecroppers in Alabama were virtually propertyless. Contracts were made each year verbally, which gave sharecroppers little to any safety legally, so no safety nets whatsoever. And they paid their debts through a portion of crops raised. The main problem with this is that they were forced to only really cultivate one crop, the owner's choice, and that was cotton. The landowner provided everything to the sharecropper, including acreage, house, draft animals, planting materials, even the food and cash advances, all of which was deducted from the sharecropper's portion of the crop at an abnormally high interest rate. As Kelly writes specifically on this matter, the system not only kept most tenants in debt, but perpetuated living conditions that bordered on intolerable. The sharecropper's day-to-day diet consisted of bare rations of fatback, beans, molasses, and cornbread. Because of this, most sharecroppers and their families suffered from nutritional deficiencies such as rickets and pellagra. Like the two, like I know what rickets is. I don't know what the first one was, but like rickets is fucking horrible. Once the cotton had been harvested and baled and accounts had been settled, sharecroppers usually found themselves empty-handed. Having to cultivate their own garden, if time allowed, most sharecroppers were forced to beg for food or cash advances to survive, the latter getting them more in debt, or spending several days without eating anything, as many were forced to do. Women's lives were especially hard in the world of sharecropping. On top of having to help out in the cotton fields, they had to raise families, do laundry, and other household work, tend livestock, cook, clean, and all of this while making only half of what their husbands made. To make matters worse, Kelly writes, while husbands and eldest sons would leave to nearby cities or mines to find work, escape family obligations, or avoid prosecution in one form or another, the women of the house were left to do all the work without the help of male labor. It was not unusual for black women to manage the the household finances, and to settle the year's negotiated claims with the landlord. This was due to several reasons, but mainly as a defensive measure. On some plantations, like I said before, if a male sharecropper wanted to settle his yearly debts, the landlord's wife would be there to negotiate on behalf of the landlord. The reason being for this, uh, the reason for this being, if the sharecropper objected to the outcome of the arrangement, the landlord could accuse the sharecropper of insulting a white woman. Kelly writes, the presence of the landlord's wife or eldest daughter in his place um, militated the landlord's ability to construe the dialogue as a violation of white womanhood. So they would send, the wives would go and they would basically, then it would take all the force out from behind that. So basically, they couldn't say that, a black male sharecropper did this. When they send the wife who can read and can write would stand in his place, and then it would really take the wind out of the sails of any bullshit that the white landowner wanted to do. Another factor that played into why black women were an important role of survival was that they had a higher literacy rate in formal education. According to the 1940 census, black women outnumbered black men when it came to receiving a formal education. With the black belt literacy rate only as high as 35 to 40%, being able to read and write could determine a sharecropper's success and failure. Women were so important to the families that if they were to become ill or die unexpectedly, it would mark ruin for an already desperate family. One sharecropper recounted, as long as mother lived, she managed some way to keep us in school, but the boss took everything away from father until he would be so worried he would not know what to do. The deplorable conditions to which sharecroppers were forced to work was compounded by how these plantations were laid out. Some sharecroppers stuck in a cycle of unending debt would just up and leave an unsuspecting landowner in a crucial part of the harvest. This was because open collective resistance was almost impossible. Sharecroppers' homes were located near the edge of plantations where 2 to 3 miles often separated different families. Due to this, individual acts of rebellion were more common, such as theft, arson, sabotage, and the occasional outbreak of individual violence. These actions and others were effective in gaining small material gains for sharecroppers at the individual level. One big change to sharecropping came with the affordable automobile and improved roads. With an easier way off the plantation, along with access to more affordable goods, landowners were forced to furnish sharecroppers with cash instead of credit lines. This was to keep them shopping at the country store and the plantation commissaries, as well as away from higher paying jobs in urban areas. However, with the Great Depression in 1929, cash was rare, and the old way of extending lines of credit made its way back into the lives of sharecroppers, and there with it, more debt. As we can see, the life of a sharecropper and his family was one of poverty, sickness, debt, and desperation. This desperation was not just seen by those living, by those living it, but by people living thousands of miles away in a country whose workers is basically the Soviet Union, right? So it's seen by the communists of the Soviet Union, saw the plight of the sharecroppers. So Kelly writes, following a decade of debate over the Negro question as it pertained to CPUSA in 1928 at the 6th World Congress of the Communist International, it was declared that the black population of the Black Belt portion of the Deep South consisted with an oppressed nation. The region being dominated by cotton plantation had counties with a black majority, and therefore the black population had a right to self-determination, which meant a right to political power, control over the economy, and the right to secede from the United States. To get a first-person account of this, we need to look at Harry Haywood's book Black Bolshevik, an autobiography and an Afro-American communist. Haywood was present in the USSR during the Sixth World Congress and a witness to the debate himself. Haywood writes that this was not the first time the Comintern had debated the topic. Now it was undoubtedly Stalin who was pushing the position at the time, but before it was Lenin himself who had first put forth the proposal. It first appeared in Lenin's draft thesis on the national colonial question, in which he states it should be the directive of all communist parties to render aid to the revolutionary movements among the dependent and underprivileged nations, including Ireland, American Negroes, he writes, and its colonies. The final resolution defining the Black movement as a national revolutionary, citing the exploitation and the struggle of Black workers in the Black Belt, provided the necessary conditions for a national revolutionary movement. The new line stated that CPUSA was to champion the Black struggle for complete and real equality, for the abolition of all kind of racial, social, and political inequalities. It called for the energetic struggle against any exhibition of white chauvinism and for active resistance to lynching. It declared that the industrialization of the South and the growth of the Black proletariat was the most important phenomenon in recent years. The last part is what pertains to what would become the Sharecroppers Union. SPUSA was told to strengthen its work among Negro proletarians, drawing into its ranks the most conscious elements. They were to fight for the acceptance of Black workers into unions from which they were barred by this fight, but this fight did not exclude the organization from separate trade unions when necessary. So basically, the fight to either join, have them be accepted by the unions that were there, or to form separate trade unions if that couldn't happen. Most important part of this resolution came for the call to concentrate the concentration of work in the South to organize the masses of soil tillers, the sharecroppers. Here we have a clear line from the Comintern to CPUSA to organize Black workers in the South into unions, especially sharecroppers. So basically, how the next thing is, how was CPUSA able to do this? And this lies with the propaganda apparatus, the Southern Worker, and newspapers in general. In 1929, CPUSA selected Birmingham, Alabama, the center for heavy industry in the South, as its headquarters for the 17th District. There it would serve to organize the workers not only in Birmingham, but also be used as a jumping off point for organizing sharecroppers. The party sent two full-time organizers, Tom Johnson and Harry Jackson, both of whom were from the North, and organized unions there to start up the new headquarters. Quickly, they learned this was not going to be an easy task. When, after a meeting with their contact about organizing miners, the contact's home was firebombed. Though they had to lie low, they were able to make connections with the Black Belt by 1931. Though they understood the need for collective action, Black sharecroppers were not too inspired by the call to self-determination. Mary Stanton writes in her book, Red, Black, White, the Alabama Communist Party, 1930-1950, that in 1930, the CPUSA established the League of Struggle for Negro Rights. But that did not take long for Southern organizers to determine that Black people, by and large, did not want a nation within a nation. To them, this sounded much like segregation, and in the end, they wanted to be able to opt fully into the American dream. This, coupled with the editor of the Southern Worker arguing that only industrial workers were capable to lead sharecroppers because the latter lacked any experience in doing so, started to bring doubts about what it is that SPUSA was actually doing there. Then came the incident that sparked it all. In January 1931, 500 sharecroppers had an uprising in England, Arkansas, which compelled Southern communists to take the rural poor more seriously. Birmingham party leaders praised the Arkansas sharecroppers and wrote about how Alabama sharecroppers should do the same. The response was overwhelming, with the Southern Worker being flooded with letters from poor Black Alabama sharecroppers. A sharecropper from Waverly, Alabama, requested full information on this fight against starvation and pledged to do like the Arkansas farmers with the assistance of communist organizers. Across the Black Belt counties of Alabama, letters came pouring in. However, the party's position on social and racial equality did not resonate with the white tenant farmers. And within a few months, the connections with them in Coleman and St. Clair counties had dried up. Organizing continued through the forerunner of the union, the CFWU, which launched in Tallapoosa County. Estelle Milner, the daughter of a black Tallapoosa sharecropper, was the link between Birmingham and the farmers. She laid the groundwork for the organization and distributed in secret copies of the Southern Worker and placed leaflets so farmers could find them. Two brothers, Tommy and Ralph Gray, contacted the party and got sharecroppers to send letters to the Southern Worker. Early that spring, they invited a communist organizer to help them build a union. That organizer was no other than Harry Haywood. I was eager to visit the area to see how our theory regarding the national question and the role of the black peasantry were worked out in practice. Hayward noted firsthand why the sharecroppers were well versed in organizing themselves, contrary to the opinion of the editor of the Southern Worker. Several of the poor farmers had worked in the mines north of Birmingham and in the steel plants in the city itself. There was a continuous movement to and from the city, which meant that the development of the sharecropper struggle took a more organized and revolutionary form. What he is saying here is that because of their mobility and ability to move information between locations, they saw how past organizing in coal mines and urban areas had worked before and took that with them into the Sharecroppers Union. Hayward also noted how militant the sharecroppers were when it came to being armed. They were guns of all kinds, shotguns, rifles, and pistols. Sharecroppers came into meetings armed and left their guns in their coats when they came in. Hayward explains that this was due to violence the sharecroppers faced from law enforcement in the white community. Before Hayward arrived in Tallapoosa County, a shootout between the sheriff's department, the white mob they assembled, and the sharecroppers had taken place. This was due to law enforcement not wanting a communist-instigated Negro rebellion. The shootout wounded the sheriff and killed Ralph Gray, as Hayward recalled. Gray's home was riddled with bullets by the posse, and when they broke in, they found him dead. This became known as the Camp Hill Battle. However, this did not deter the sharecroppers, and by the spring of 1932, the Union claimed 500 members in Tallapoosa and Chambers County. So basically what I say here is that we have a marginalized group of people that rally around a radical ideology because it was the only one that was going to meet their needs materially and really help organize, and they wanted to better their lives, basically. So I think at first I write that they probably had no concept of Marxism or Leninism or who even Stalin was, but by the end, they all became educated and taught themselves about Marxist Leninism and read theory and put that to practice in a way that suited them at the time. Yeah, Tyler.
Without this, you don't get your Fred Hamptons, your Black Panther parties.
So yeah, basically at the end, Kelly says Kelly writes, I believe, that this movement and how they organized in the 30s laid the groundwork to the civil rights movement of the 50s. And I'll get into that specifically, how they had to conduct like clandestine meetings and things. And a running theme of this is that it's really Black women who are the backbone to this organization and really get things off the ground and running. And without them, it never would have happened. Tommy, you literally just finding pictures of me from Facebook and putting them as your background. I hate you. That was when I worked at the camp. That's like one of my best campers, Monty, and he ended up being my camper again as an adult, and we still keep in contact.
This is that Pierce Morgan pic where
you shut up. Will you stop doing
It's a picture of him with a black person to prove he's not racist.
I hate you so much.
Like, look at me, guys. I like the blacks.
Oh my God.
It's the little thumbs up.
I know, right?
Is
Oh
that
my
a
God.
shell necklace that you're wearing?
Yeah, we made it in arts and crafts. Look, I was 16 years old.
Like that episode is really good up till now, but there's just been a rotation of pictures of Nelson behind Tommy this entire time.
Anyway, so I want to make this point that there is a labor movement sweeping across the nation currently at this time, where there's trade unions out there and a much larger socialist party working across other fields, including tenant farming. You have the Southern Tenant Farmers Union, the STFU, working in the Rim South. And really read Hammer and Hoe because it goes into more detail of why this all fell apart and why the STFU and the Sharecroppers Union never really got together. And really, this all answers the answer lies in what happened before communists got to Birmingham and how union efforts in the mines there failed. So, continue. Radical politics is nothing new to Alabama, as Kelly writes. The Socialist Party was visibly active in the state around the turn of the century, claiming 400 members in 1908. Socialists had a small following within poor white farmers in Covington, Coleman, Baldwin, and Bibb County. Skilled workers in Birmingham were attracted to the Socialist Party, albeit in small numbers, but they were able to elect Arlie K. Barber to the city commission in 1915. The peak of the party, though, came in 1912 when Eugene Debs, the Socialist Party candidate for president, reached 3,029 votes, or 2.6% of Alabama's electorate. Unlike some other states, in Alabama, the party was strictly a white man's party. In 1905, Montgomery socialist E.F. Andrews said that organizing blacks, especially to the point of integration, would have disastrous results. Andrews believed the time was right for socialism, but he feared that organizing the black workers would lead to change, and I quote, lead to changes of fostering social equality. In fact, there were times where the coal mines in and around Birmingham had a union presence, such as with the UWM, which was formed by former Knights of Labor, but was crushed during the miners' strike of 1894. The UMWA, the United Miner Workers of America, had tried to organize Birmingham miners, but were crushed after World War I due to state violence and race baiting. In 1919 and 1920, the majority black coal miners struck again, but were crushed when the state troopers were dispatched by Governor Thomas Kilby. This marked an end of biracial unionism in Alabama until the 1930s. Kelly writes that xenophobia, racism, and a rigid moralism informed mainstream politics in the Birmingham area during the 20s, lasting well into the 30s. At that time, the Klan started to become prominent in the Birmingham area, with a great number of poor whites joining the essentially middle-class Protestant organization. This did little to improve said lives of poor whites' living conditions, even before the Great Depression. Again, working against self-interest. While this alone might be enough to see why union efforts in Birmingham failed, it is important to take a step back and look at how the rest of the nation saw biracial unions. In his article, It Ain't Your Color, It's Your Scabbing, Mark Noon examines how black workers were viewed in the literature at the time. Noon starts by noting that strike breaking also crossed class lines. Middle and upper class male college students would take on the roles of strike breakers or scabs to express their antagonism towards workers. Throughout the 19th and 20th century, the U.S. government also played a role in exacerbating tensions between black and white workers. During the coal miners' strike of 1892 and 1899 in Coeur d'Alene, Idaho, black soldiers were used against the majority white union workers because black soldiers were, and I quote, believed much less likely than white troops to fraternize with strikers. While black troops were used during the Pullman strike of 1894, the American Federation of Labor was successful in attracting black workers into their union. However, black workers found that they were treated unfairly by the unions. They were denied jobs on union projects, the unions failed to protect them from racial abuse, and the union leadership failed to hear their complaints regarding these issues. This became so much of an issue that Frederick Douglass, who before the Civil War wrote in favor of interracial labor unions, stated that, and I quote, colored men can feel under no obligation to hold out in a strike with whites, as the latter have never recognized them. Racism felt in the labor movement at the time fueled an African American labor force ready and willing to break strikes. Author Upton Sinclair, yes, the Upton Sinclair, covered strikes for the Socialist Weekly Appeal to Reason and had little sympathy for the struggle of black workers. He describes the black workers as lazy, incompetent, and threatening, especially when they get access to knives in the packing house. The lack of objection to this and their depiction of black workers provides additional proof that the American socialists were, and I quote, influenced by a doctrine of white supremacy, a doctrine which argued that, quote, the Negro worker belonged to an inferior race and warned their comrades against violating the Caucasian purity of their association. Also, when I talked about in the coal mining episode, the first one we did, is that a lot of black miners who knew about labor struggles were tricked into going to new mines, were told that they wouldn't have to deal with Jim Crow laws, only to get there and be greeted by white miners who were on strikes, and then fights would break out, and the black miners didn't know the white miners were on strikes. And I forgot what, you can go back and listen to the first episode, but one of those towns specifically became like a sundown town because of this practice. This is going to piss off a lot of people, but it needs to be said, and it's from Harry Haywood. Probably the most damning account comes firsthand from Harry Haywood himself when he remarked that, quote, This was no doubt a legacy of the old Socialist Party. Even such a revolutionary as Debs had said, quote, "We have nothing special to offer the Negro, and we cannot make separate appeals to all races." Haywood continued by citing Debs on the Afro-American question, quote, "Social equality, forsooth, is pure fraud and serves to mask the real issue, which is not social equality, but economic freedom." Quote, "The Socialist Party platform has not a word in reference to social equality." So basically, I say here, basically, my conclusion of this section is it laid out like why black sharecroppers formed the union and turned to communism. So obviously, the Socialist Party wasn't going to help them. Traditional labor unions wanted them out, etc. They were probably some of the most oppressed workers in the country at this time, and so they wanted to form the union to collectively bargain for better wages, better rights, and better everything, basically. So one of the first local connections between the sharecroppers and the communists came from a young school teacher, the daughter of a black Tallapoosa sharecropper, Estelle Milner, mentioned before. She started to lay the groundwork between sharecroppers and the Communist Party leaders in Birmingham by secretly distributing issues of the Southern worker, as well as strategically placing communist leaflets in areas where black workers were likely to find them. She was the sister of Tommy and Ralph Gray, who were ones that contacted the party and got them to send communist organizers to help build the union. The pursuing battle that cost Ralph Gray his life was praised by the national communist leadership. The union's resistance, they saw, vindicated the party's slogan calling for the right to self-determination. With the international labor defense of the sharecroppers involved, they reasoned that the effectiveness of resistance outside the courtroom was course that should be taken. However, the union organizers felt different. They saw the romanticization of the bloodletting and the reprisal of the white authorities with the forced uprooting of hundreds of black families from their Tallapoosa County homes as unsustainable. By the time cotton picking season rolled around, landlords were back to their old tactics of threatening to cut off needed supplies and advancements to the sharecroppers. A new way of doing things was necessary. And here comes, and with that came the communist sharecroppers on the ground. In 1931, the SCU did not operate as with an organizational secretary. And that year, and into 1932, the only connection they had with the party was a 19-year-old young Communist League member named Harry Hirsch. Hirsch acted as a liaison, carrying out what information he could between local chapters. As the union at this point was operating with virtually no Communist Party direction. This slowly began to change, however, when another young Communist League member, Ella Gray, became the ad hoc secretary in May 1932. She is credited by Harry Wicks for keeping the union together during this trying time. By the time she left the position of secretary of the Tallapoosa County, the Tallapoosa County membership in the SCU rose to 591 members in 25 locals. They had also spread into Lee and Macon County with memberships growing. However, due to Gray's age and that she was a woman, district organizer Nate Ross appointed Al Murphy to the position of SCU secretary. Al Murphy did prove himself to be an effective Communist Party organizer. He saw the need to move out of eastern Alabama and into the central part of the Black Belt. He established a headquarters in Montgomery, Alabama, where he received help from local black communists. This included Charles Tasker, the leader of the Montgomery Unemployment Council, Capitola Tasker, who was the director of the SCU Women's Auxiliaries, and Montgomery Party leader John Beans. At this time in Montgomery, there was a small faction of white liberals who formed a Marxist study group. This group was composed of wealthy and prominent people, including members of the Jewish community, who were interested in world peace and domestic social reforms. The most prominent members of this group were Rabbi Benjamin Goldstein of Temple Bethor and professor of sociology and dean at Montevallo, Olive Stone. Not Oliver Stone, Olive Stone. While none of the members joined the Communist Party, they provided financial support for communist activities in Birmingham, Montgomery, and the Black Belt, with Stone donating $50 to $100 occasionally to the SCU. I kind of find it funny that you have like white liberals that were like, we have a study group, and it's kind of like, it just reminded me of like bullshit today. Like, let's have a study group and not actually like go out and do shit. Structural changes occurred under Murphy that benefited the Union too. With Murphy in charge, the calls from white party leaders for more militant actions of demonstrating in front of the landlords' houses ended. Local sharecroppers knew that this was more a suicidal directive and never took it seriously. Aware of the history of the sharecroppers' underground tactics before the Union, Murphy developed tactics that emphasized self-preservation and cunningness. No more meetings in abandoned houses, no more walking in large groups, and no more engaging in armed conflicts unless Murphy was notified. The latter was only in self-defense. The latter was only if self-defense could not be avoided. Murphy told the members to act humbly and to not draw attention. However, these instructions did not mean to disarm. As SCU member Lemon Johnson, former secretary of the Hope Hole local, believed, quote, armed self-defense distinguished the SCU from other organizations. Johnson stated, the only thing going to stop them from killing you, you got to go shoot. This was emphasized again by Harry Haywood at the SCU meeting in Dadeville, where he noted the sharecroppers came armed with an array of firepower, as I mentioned before. Murphy also decentralized the Union and established captains for locals and informed them of the situation in other counties. When available, dues were collected. Captains oversaw the day-to-day operations of the local and their extensions, and those who could write were responsible to write the party's press about local conditions. Most importantly, the captains were not to become dictators, with Murphy frequently saying that they are not bosses of the locals. Weekly meetings were held in secret to avoid unwanted attention from authorities and vigilantes. Written records, including minutes, were rarely kept, lest they would be found and used against the SCU, as well as the problem with literacy among members. One tactic that became popular was to cloak meetings by holding Bible studies where local secretaries would record minutes by underlying pertinent passages in the Bible. These, quote, Bible studies served as a lesson in how Black women became the backbone of the SCU's efforts. The traditional ideology surrounding the plight of the Black population was always dominated by the stories of strong men. However, this ideology distorted the Black woman's role in the SCU, where their organization skills and basic concerns were the foundation of the SCU. The traditional Bible studies and social clubs that Black women were used to became the model for the women's auxiliaries. These groups were known as sewing clubs, and they exercised considerable power within the Union. They would meet separately to draw the attention of the authorities away from other Union activities and to give time for one parent to watch the children. They provide a forum to talk about strategies to discuss conditions of the local union. They read The Daily Worker, The Southern Worker, Working Women, and Working Women. When possible, they would correspond with not only locals, but the national and international communist movement. Usually being more literate than their male comrades, the women would write on pieces of sack and wrapping paper to the party's newspaper about matters within the local unions. Radical theories were not just left to book clubs and union members, however. At the University of Alabama, Professor Joe Gelder, whose family came from an upper middle class background, began to indulge in Marxist ideology. Gelder found his way into communism by way of academia. After witnessing strikes and repressions of workers in Birmingham, he began to question the New Deal liberalism and found that the works of Marx and Engels were becoming more of an answer. Coming from a science background, he admired Lenin's approach to apply scientific principles to government. Once he read Stalin's foundation of Leninism, it all started to make sense. He organized study groups on campus, much like those that would come 3 decades later. He drafted petitions opposing the Downs Literature Ordinance that made having communist literature a felony. The latter ordinance was specifically designed to subvert organized labor, which had become more and more attached to the Communist Party. While he was able to make headway organizing at the university and with the Communist Party, reprisals from the university and local law enforcement took its toll and forced Gelder to leave elsewhere. Harry Haywood remarked that I left Dadeville in high spirits, more than ever convinced of the correctness of our line. that the black peasantry, under the leadership of the working class and the Communist Party, was the motor for black rebellion in the Deep South. Robin Kelly, I believe, sums up the partnering of the black sharecroppers and the Communist Party amazingly when he writes, "They became communists out of their own concern for black people, and thus had much in common with the black elite whose leadership they challenged. The Communist Party was such a unique vehicle for black working class opposition because it encouraged interracial unity without completely compromising racial politics. Irrespective of the Comintern, directives, or official pronouncements, the Alabama Communist Party was resilient enough to conform to the black cultural traditions, but taught enough to remain Marxist at its core." So basically, then I go on to say, like, uh, we have sharecroppers in the Black Belt, and black workers in Birmingham, the Communist Party, we have international movement. So that conclusion is that the conclusion is that overall, despite brutal repression and advanced mechanisms of farming, the SCU was able to get higher wages and a better standing of living for its membership, which I'm going to talk about now. This is when we start getting into the strike actions and how the tactics and how they actually helped. And also, you see like kind of a split. I don't have the direct quote in here, but it's when I get to it, I'll mention it about how you see like a split between black working class and like black upper class. Beginning in 1932, the SCU put forth strike action. By threatening a strike that year, the SCU won members on at least one Tallapoosa plantation the right to sell cotton they raised for themselves directly, as well as the continuation of food advancements in the winter. There were setbacks early on, though, due to violence the SCU had tried to avoid. That December, SCU member Clifford James was debt-ridden and faced eviction and the seizure of his livestock. When his landlord asked for the local sheriff to serve a warrant for said livestock, they were met at Johnson's home by 15 armed members of the SCU. The confrontation that followed saw James beg the sheriff not to take his property, to no avail. When the authorities stepped on James' property, they were warned to stop due to the unjust nature of the seizure. The sheriff's department interpreted this as a threat, and a gunfight ensued. The authorities were forced to flee, and the governor refused to send in the state police to help with the eviction. However, the sheriff returned with more men from neighboring counties, and more gunfire erupted. Members of the Union were killed, some were arrested, and others, including James, fled. James, having been shot in the back, made his way by foot 17 miles to the Tuskegee Institute Hospital, where he was treated by a doctor. However, this doctor called the local authorities and turned in James's whereabouts, and he was handed over to the Montgomery County Sheriff. He and other SCU members who were present at the shootout died from infection of their wounds in jail. This incident sparked a wave of repression against SCU members, and they were forced underground and to reorganize. It also caused a backlash in the working class black community towards the Tuskegee Institute, with many calling them bootlicker reformists and traitors to their fellow blacks. The silver lining in all this is that the violence which just took place did not slow the rise of the membership. By June 1933, it was reported that membership grew to 2,000, organized in 73 locals. This included 80 women auxiliaries and 20 youth groups. After this, we see a turn towards traditional union-style strikes and tactics in order to win demands. The Roosevelt administration tried to revamp a dying cotton economy in the South by passing the AAA. The Gin Tax Act and the Cotton Control Acts of 1933 were supposed to do just that. 1/9 of revenue gained from these taxes was supposed to be given to the sharecroppers in the form of benefit checks. However, the local landlords were put in charge of distribution of these checks. Therefore, the sharecroppers never got them. I wonder why. Moreover, the landlords would use the new laws to obtain the cotton belonging to their tenants. In order to gin cotton without paying the tax, a sharecropper needed a certificate certificate from either their landlord or the planter controlled AAA board. If the sharecropper refused, the landlord would hoard the tenant's cotton until prices fell, thereby rendering it unprofitable. Other older tactics came back into play, such as evictions, land relocation, and applying cash subsidies to the wages instead of sharing it with the tenants. At this time, cotton production remained unmechanized due to a lack of capital amongst the landlords, and this was the opportunity for the SCU to win material gains. In 1933, most of the cotton crop was worked by the first wave of evicted tenants. That year, the SCU called its first strike on several plantations in Chambers and Lee counties. However, the strike was a bust when 7 SCU members were arrested. Despite this, thousands of evicted tenants turned to the SCU for help during these trying times. So much so that by March 1934, the SCU membership swelled to 6,000 members and had established locals in Lowndes, Montgomery, Macon, and Dallas County. This growth made Murphy move the SCU underground headquarters from Birmingham to Montgomery, with nearly half of its membership coming between July 1933 and April 1934. The SCU began to deploy new tactics to use against landlords. With hundreds of evicted tenants and sharecroppers being removed from the relief rolls and the Civil Works Administration jobs in order for landlords to have cheap labor for the upcoming harvest, the SCU fought for immediate relief and for the federal government to investigate local CWA administrators. The black women of the SCU formed the Committee of Action and marched to the local CWA to demand relief, and were eventually rewarded partial demands. This marked one of the first victories for the SCU and its new membership. The SCU instructed tenants and sharecroppers that had not been evicted not to join. Let me start over. The SCU instructed tenants and sharecroppers that had not been evicted not to sign joint party checks unless the landlord were to pay them in cash and not debt settled. They got sharecroppers to boycott plantations they deemed the worst when it came to the treatment of workers. Finally, the SCU members refused to give up their share of rental cotton until they got their portion of the AAA check. These minor victories led to a major showdown in the summer of 1934 when SCU called for another larger cotton picker strike. The 1934 cotton picker strike marked the SCU's first majority victory, and with it brought more popularity and more members. Late summer 1934, the SCU called for the strike in Lee and Tallapoosa counties. They demanded $1 per 100 pounds of cotton they harvested, with the strike starting in September and spreading amongst several large plantations involving up to 1,000 sharecroppers. Landlords responded first by evicting striking sharecroppers, but due to it being the height of picking season, this failed. Next, they resorted to violence by using the local police to arrest striking workers in Lee County. Vigilantes in Tallapoosa County shot and killed 3 strikers, including a black woman who was an organizer. Warnings were posted on the doors of union members, which read, quote, "Warning, take notice. If you want to do well and live a healthy life, you better leave the Sharecroppers Union," end quote. One incident in Lee County had Klansmen kidnap SCU organizer Commit Tolbert and 2 other SCU members, draped them in chains, and threatened to drown them in the swamp if they did not renounce the union. When the local sheriff finally intervened, he arrested the kidnapped sharecroppers and charged them with attempted murder. Makes no fucking sense whatsoever. The Alabama Relief Administration also played a role in undermining the strike. They dropped any able-bodied person from the relief roll who did not volunteer to pick cotton as scabs. Even with repression, mass evictions, and influx of cheap labor, the SCU was able to claim victories. A majority of affected plantations, the SCU won 75 cents per 100 pounds picked. And on a plantation not affected by the strike, landlords raised their wages from 35 cents per pound to 50 cents per pound picked. To put this in perspective, in 1931, the going rate for sharecroppers was 30 cents per 100 pound picked. That was an increase of 45 cents for most members and a 20-cent raise for those not directly affected. That was a 150% increase for those affected by the strike and 67% increase for those not affected by the strike. In 1935, the SCU called another much larger strike, this time in Lowndes, Tallapoosa, Montgomery, Lee, Ralph, Dallas, and Chambers counties. Sharecroppers were told to leave the fields on May 1st if the landlords did not agree to raise their daily wage to $1. The SCU handed out leaflets calling for a 10-hour workday, equal pay for women and children, and for no discrimination against blacks. This was the largest strike action undertaken by the union, with more than 1,500 workers spanning over 35 plantations. Continuing with the successful strategy of outwitting the landlords and authorities, the sharecroppers did not picket or engage in violent confrontations. In Lee, Tallapoosa, and Chambers counties, the SCU won most of their demands without violence. However, in Lowndes, Montgomery, and especially Dallas counties, they faced extreme repression. In Dallas County, SCU members were arrested and even flogged for participating in the strike. 3 different communist organizers were sent to Selma to investigate those arrested, but were all arrested themselves and beaten. 2 made it back to Birmingham, but one, John Willie Foster, was never heard from again and is presumed dead. 2 white communists in Dallas County, who were sent to get firsthand accounts of the progress there, were arrested, beaten, stripped naked, tied to trees, and whipped, and had their wounds burned with matches before they were dumped on the side of the road just outside of Selma. The strikes in Dallas and Lowndes County were eventually crushed. In the remaining counties, the SCU was able to win $1 a day in most of the plantations targeted. Some had to settle for 75 cents, but won 3 meals a day and transportation to and from work. The 10-hour workday was won on 2 or 3 plantations. Dairy hands and plow hands, inspired by the SCU, walked off the job and won $1 increases in their wages, while several more had their monthly wages doubled. While not as successful as they had hoped, the SCU saw their membership grow to nearly 10,000 members. And so that's basically what I go into my conclusion talking about the Sharecroppers Union. Basically, I have, if you want to know more, Robin Kelly's Hammer and Hoe, Mary Stanton's Red, Black, and White, the book I referenced, Harry Haywood, if you can find a copy of Black Bolshevik, not the reprint and original, and then Mark Noon's article, It Ain't Your Color, It's Your Scabbing. What I remember from reading eventually what happened is that the SCU became a victim of Browderism, which was basically the Communist Party going to a more popular front against fascism and kind of like casting the black sharecroppers to the side and not really caring about them anymore. They never really combated the white chauvinist problem, and so black members never really got into leadership roles. They fell out with there was a rift between the socialist-backed Southern Tenant Farmers Workers Union and the SCU, because the socialist-backed STFU union saw the SCU as too radical, and the STFU was actually, from what I remember, more anti-communist. Basically, that's the ending in a nutshell. Like I said, definitely read Hammer and Hoe. Check out those other books. Y'all have any questions?
What's wrong with the reprint of Black Bolshevik?
So apparently, in the reprint of Black Bolshevik, was happened after Harry Haywood died, and one of his wives got it republished. He's like divorced and married like 3 times, and it's like got like 300 pages of stuff like taken out. It's not like an accurate depiction of what happened.
Okay. And why didn't Stalin send those troops to Mobile?
He threatened to send them in 1935 if like the state severely cracked down on the Sharecroppers Union and basically tried to kill them all. Like, he said that he'd send Red Army troops to the Port of Mobile to help the Sharecroppers Union if the state came down heavily against the sharecroppers.
Like, imagine an alternate timeline.
Imagine an alternate timeline where Red Army troops come up through the Port of Mobile.
So the only thing that I would ask for you specifically is that we know that we have international listeners who aren't going to understand even what sharecropper is, because they probably didn't have to learn that. So I would just suggest like explaining how we got to the point of sharecropping and what that actually means.
So
real quick.
basically, the South was still a massively agricultural based economy after the Civil War. You actually had an expansion of plantations after the Civil War, and like more land that was cultivated for cotton. But because they couldn't have slaves anymore, white plantation owners and the white aristocracy landowners did what they called sharecropping, which the best way to explain it is like modern day feudal lords and serfs. So like the sharecroppers were basically the serfs, and the feudal landlords were basically the plantation owners. So the sharecroppers were technically free, but because they got all their tools and supplies and food and everything from the landowner and had to cultivate cotton, they were basically debt slaves to the plantation owner. And the only way for them to get out of that most of the time was just up and leave. And that's where you have like part of the Great Migration of getting out of the South and moving to industrial cities in the North.
Yeah, I remember like when I was in high school in Florida, obviously, getting to that point in like my history books, and teachers still teaching the idea that people who were slaves and their families beyond them just didn't leave the plantations because like they were too dumb or too ignorant to do anything else. Like
Wow.
that was still like the conversation. And so this had been like 2005. So
Dang.
I want, on a less serious, on a funny note, Tommy has literally gone back to my sophomore year of high school and found pictures of me to use as his background during the Zoom call. I think that was homecoming sophomore year, Tommy. We were outside of an Olive Garden.
you look like those 16-year-olds who get hired, their first job is like a host at Olive Garden. You look like all of you all doing that outside of it.
But I know definitely like there's a lot like that's kind of really like what I talked about was like the first half of everything. The downfall and more of it comes later in Robin Kelly's Hammer and Hoe. But a lot of the information that I got for this paper was from Robin Kelly's Hammer and Hoe and like the other books and articles that I referenced. But definitely listen to Valley Labor Report's episode with Robin Kelly and definitely read Hammer and Hoe. I think that one of the more important things that I remember reading in the book, like I told Tommy earlier, was like this set the groundwork for the civil rights movement in the 50s. And I think that Robin Kelly even mentions in his book that like when old sharecroppers like met leaders of the civil rights movement, I think met people afterwards, like in the 80s and 90s when these people were old, they talked about like, hey, we did this before the civil rights movement. The whole idea of the Bible studies is ingenious. Like this whole way of like sneaking around the authorities and just being smarter than the white people really got it done. You see like what happens when like marginalized people like run an organization because they knew exactly, they used communist ideology as like they used the theory as like a guide, but all of their practice came from stuff that they already knew. And they took it, and I think what leftists need to realize is that like they took the theory and they implemented it in the conditions that they had at the time, and it made it work for them. So they weren't like dogmatist in the way that like so and so said it this way and it has to be done this way. They're like, we applied that, we took it to the conditions that helped us, and we learned from it, and we educated ourselves, and then we took that and put it to our own practice that met our material needs.
So you mean
in this case the
Marxist?
sharecroppers?
You can't be a purist Marxist. What?
If anyone is just considers himself a Marxist, they're sus. Like pick an ideological line. Like
You see that we played Among Us twice, and now Nelson is definitely going with the verbiage. Oh yeah, sus.
sus.
Is that red is sus?
red is sus. I just hate that no one remembers the Menendez brothers.
All right, nobody's going to understand the
What?
jokes from this. For anybody
Um,
who didn't watch the stream, Nelson wants to play Among Us using the name.
Eric
Which one did you choose? Eric? Okay.
but yeah, so I wanted to do this episode for a while, and like I wish I could have brought like more from the book, but definitely like we said before, like this is just the tip of the iceberg, and really to get into this history, you need to pick up Hammer and Hoe, and then like I said, the comments, the red, black, and white, and really look at like what was going on in that time period. I think the biggest shocker was when Harry Haywood and Mark Noon and all them talked about how like the Socialist Party was basically just it was like kind of like a white supremacist party, and they were just like, yeah, it's kind of it still
You're
resonates.
surprised by
I mean,
that?
I shouldn't say surprised. I should say that like we hear like people like Upton Sinclair and we hear like Eugene Debs like held up on a mantelpiece, but like reading this stuff, they kind of, I mean, I guess Debs got better later on in life, but like Upton Sinclair was kind of a dick and like a racist asshole. Like more stuff in that article that he said was just like straight up.
Yeah, what about that
holy
that
shit.
Africa piece that he put out? Upton Sinclair, the super fucking racist shit.
All I remember is the jungle about the meatpacking industry.
Yeah, the jungle. Yeah.
That was
That's
about the meatpacking industry and like
But didn't it have some like really fucked up depictions of like
he had really fucked up depictions of like Sicilians and like black workers and like immigrants in general. He was just like they're like dumb and shouldn't be trusted, and they're like subhuman.
yeah.
Basically, because there are two white men in this conversation, I just want to say, especially to you guys, if you have ever liked a white person in history, reevaluate right now. You're gonna find it over and over again. If you're still like confused or surprised by it now in your 30s, it's gonna keep going like that. All right.
It's just like holy shit, like it and it was like the whole class reductionist line that was like that is still like prevalent today. It's just like when Debs was like, oh, we don't need to make concessions. She was like, what the fuck? Like you do. Like we know this now. Like it's just I don't know. It's just really was like
There's a lot about this story that, I mean, obviously it's not from my personal history because I come from an indigenous history, but like there's so many parallels with that without going specifically into like unions and stuff like that. I've never really looked to see if there's any like specifically indigenous socialist or indigenous unionizers or anything like that, anything that kind of crosses with this. But like indigenous people would often hold ceremonies that were illegal in the respective countries, either in the US or in Canada, by doing things like having Bible sessions or church sessions and stuff like that. Like it's constantly once you have the danger of being legalized or brutalized out of it, you end up just utilizing the way that the oppressors say, oh well, you can have a church function, but you can't have potlatch or something like that. So they end up going underground. This constantly happens, and this is why a lot of these leftist, specifically like socialist spaces that are so heavily white, you are the guys that need us. You need Black and indigenous people in there because you're just going to keep fucking up in the same ways.
Yeah, and you see that time and time again, and like this was this you see this as like the start, and it was just like holy shit. I remember just reading it and being like, what the fuck? Why are we still having these same fucking problems? Then I read Settlers, and I realized that white people are the devil.
No, you didn't read Settlers, Nelson.
You've
never finished it.
I read a third of Settlers and realized white people are the devil.
What were you going to say, Tommy?
Oh, I was just surprised that the Tuskegee Institute ratted those guys out.
That was that was like a big thing.
I mean, I don't understand. They could have just given them sickle cell and just called it a day, but
I want to make it clear it was like it was a black doctor at the institute that sold out the black sharecroppers, and I forget the quote. Kelly writes like a black woman, like she was the one who called them like reformist bootlickers and like all this stuff. I was like, holy shit, that's fucking hilarious.
Actually, I was having a conversation with my sister earlier today about how oftentimes the history of within these marginalized groups, so we're most familiar with it in indigenous circles, but there's always appeasers, there's always people who are going to say you have to go along with what your oppressors are saying so that fewer of us can get killed, and then you look at like the other side of that where you have people like, so again from my own context, people like Chief Joseph, who converted to Christianity, followed the kind of appeaser thing, kept his people closer to colonists for safety, as far as he said. And then basically when he was constantly fucked over by the US government, he had a rage flip and said, no, we're not going with this appeasement kind of thing anymore. But that there's a lot of times that white speakers will use those appeasers against the more radical within those groups. And I see like Tommy's nodding, like we're all familiar with this. If you're within those groups, we're all familiar with this. And we're constantly having to fight not only oppressors, but oppressors using our own people against us in the same way.
Yeah. It's much like what we were talking about earlier about Muslims and Islam and how they use those few extremists to damn the whole.
Yeah, how like new atheists. Yeah. Kai, I think that to a really good example of an indigenous union socialist organizing, where you look at South America with Evo Morales in Bolivia. Like apparently he like led the indigenous like workers there into unionization and become president. Like when it comes
I'm not unaware of what happens there. I'm talking about like we all have different colonizers, and within mostly it would be for me the American context, somewhat the Canadian context because some of my people come from Canada. Like there's good history in South America, but if I'm talking about mine, I'm talking about North America usually.
Word. As he was
try to pan Indian me. You just tried to pan Indian me. How fucking dare you?
Damn.
Got you.
Just like a white socialist.
We don't need to do anything for these people.
I'm gonna get a picture of Eugene Debs and be like, hey.
I think I got one.
What is it? I just love like the Marxist study, like white liberals and the Marxist study group. I was just like,
it was so typical. As soon as you said that, I'm like, oh,
it was
shit,
like
typical.
the first thing that came to mind. I was like, we're not gonna join the party. We're just gonna have a study group. And we're gonna like, read. I don't fucking know. I just like I remember in Harry Haywood's book, like the whole idea that like why Stalin of all people like empathized with black sharecroppers was because he was from the smaller nation.
He too was a black sharecropper.
Oh my god. Stalin was a person of color as dark as a Georgian. But Tommy, god damn it. Basically
no, come on, Nelson, you were very photogenic in that one.
That actually was my senior picture. I'm not gonna lie. That was me in the Pacific Northwest staring out of the that was in the Redwoods National Park, and I'm staring out of the Pacific Ocean. That was me like 100 pounds ago. Like the senior in high school. But
that is a fucking backdrop. That is not you.
No, it's me. Yeah, that was,
no, it isn't.
Yes, it is. We took a road trip.
Been out west, Nelson.
Tommy got that specifically from a folder of my Facebook, Spring Break 2009 or 2009.
Oh, see, it's so hard for me to believe because you upper class folk, y'all go on vacation.
Exactly.
Yeah. Me, I've never left Alabama.
Oh man, but I think that
I'm black. I've never had a vacation.
Tommy, you've been to Europe.
My family doesn't do that.
Tommy, you literally have been to more countries than I have. You went to Spain and
Nelson,
France.
You just flaunt your privilege all over Facebook.
Speaking of Europe, just as an aside, I was talking with my husband earlier today about like what kind of games we could play on stream again, and he brought up GeoGuessr Battle Royale. And
fuck?
Yeah, there's like a battle royale version of GeoGuessr, and I thought, that sounds like a cute idea. Except
what is GeoGuessr?
That like, you've never played GeoGuessr?
No, what is that?
Okay, so it basically utilizes Google Maps Street View, and it drops you in a random place, and you have to guess where that is. Based on like context clues around in the picture, and you can move a bit, but with the battle royale, you just have to guess which country it's in. But I was thinking the last thing I need is to be brought up as like me, the upper class person who lives in Europe and has been to many European countries versus three Americans trying to differentiate between like Bulgaria, Moldova, Ukraine.
Oh man.
I would like to see it, but I'm not going to play that. Anyway.
what was I saying? Stalin. So like Stalin, coming from a smaller Soviet republic, realized like wrote like writing the national question, like needing to see how um like marginalized groups need in a bigger country needed to be their cultures needed to be preserved and things like that. But I don't know, it was just interesting that you have like Lenin and Stalin were like, hey, do this, and the Communist Party USA was like, I mean, yeah, we're gonna do this and not really fix the problem. Hey, Tyler, what the fuck is your background?
I don't know.
It's an alien.
It's a picture of you.
Tommy,
It's
oh my
baby
God.
chin.
Tommy has me, but still with that background of me looking over the Pacific Ocean. I'm like looking at him, and Tommy, you were like reaching your hand out earlier, like
Petting your face.
oh my God.
I feel like I'm back in fucking high school. I have Nelson trying very hard to give a presentation. And Tyler just fucking off to get a sandwich or something. And Tommy's like trying to make us laugh. Like every time I'd start to crack, he'd start cracking.
Oh my God.
Other
You were-
pictures.
You were definitely killing me. I was like dying over here.
I was like looking down. I would see like things change behind Tommy. I'm just like, don't look at it. Don't.
Is
Look.
this what happens when I would give my presentations? Because I can't see shit.
No,
I can
we
only
were-
see what I'm
no.
reading.
No,
No,
we were.
I actually care about what you have to say.
Tommy's like,
You
why the
don't
fuck?
give B grade presentations.
Tommy's like, why we got this white man talking about black sharecroppers?
All right.
Here at Dixieland, the proletariat, we don't practice what we preach.
Here's Nelson, the white man, the leader of the group,
No.
coming in to talk about black sharecroppers,
Look,
while the
yeah.
indigenous woman and the black man, and like we're all muted.
And the
We can only watch you.
actual farmer.
He made us
Yeah.
mute. He was like, "Hey guys, I need you to mute your mics. Some truth's about to be spilled right now."
Let's speak on it. You're right. Literally, all of you have more to say on this probably than I. God damn.
With a fucking B grade paper. B grade
Yeah.
paper
It
against us.
It really was like going back and reading. I'm like, God damn it! I should have made this better. But I just cut out my my conclusion and my like synopsis of each section and whatnot.
It was
But
Well,
like
my-
8 years ago. Come on.
My unseasoned opinion, I enjoyed it.
thank you. Thank
Yeah,
you.
you did a good job.
Yeah, honestly,
Thank you.
I would have given you a C, but
Thank you, Tommy. I appreciate it, man. Oh man. But yeah, I think it's something that definitely needs to be maybe like we could get. I would like to reach out to Robin Kelly and see if he wants to come on the podcast. I think that would be so fucking dope.
What happened to our last big guest who said that they could come after March? Have you been in contact with them again?
They're busy.
TEDx speaker.
They're busy until the end of March, so I'm gonna reach out like close to the end of the month because they're swamped with PhD
who was
stuff.
that?
Kai's #1 guest, and like basically we're just gonna have to be quiet, and Kai's gonna fangirl out.
Who is it?
They are a TEDx speaker, children's author, an indigenous person from the South who talks about indigenous people being original Southerners.
Oh, I didn't know
Um,
Steven Seagal did TED Talks.
But anyway, it's hopefully in the works, so I think it's gonna happen.
You said children's book, and I was just like, holy fuck, we're getting Shel Silverstein?
No, we're getting Dr. Seuss with just the racist parts. Oh my god! But anyway, y'all, that how long did I do good on time? I think we did good.
Yeah, man.
How long's a piece of rope? Too goddamn long.
Oh man, I didn't ask to be the leader of this podcast.
You're the one who started it, man.
You just whited your way into it.
You're like, I'm a white guy. I have opinions. I need to start a
I
podcast.
have literally tried my hardest.
You colonized the fuck out of this. You literally took your Sicilian flag and stuck it in the ground. And you're like, I claim this to be mine.
The funny thing is that here's all of us like bitching at Nelson over it, except that when Nelson was on vacation for the last like basically the last 2 weeks for us. We didn't record anything for 2 weeks. And he said, oh yeah, you guys can record without me. And we're like, fucking no. None of us could talk for that long.
Literally, no, you guys could. And it would literally be y'all three just roasting me the entire episode.
It would be. Oh man. I thought about it. I really wanted to do that.
Like out of the corner of my eye, Tommy, with that picture, it looks like you're having like really awkward eye contact with somebody like real close.
You're just staring at me.
Yeah, Nelson, how do you go
just Nelson giving a dirty look to a black person.
It is.
Nelson, how do you go
picture.
from
I want to make that
How do
picture the episode icon.
how do you go from looking like a fucking American Eagle ad to looking like an Albanian arms dealer?
I'll tell you exactly what happened.
He lost all his fucking hair and he had to hide the baby chin.
I lost my hair fell out, and then I got to college and gained like 80 pounds because I don't know how to manage my feelings. So I just ate all this food and got really fat.
You look like you sell guns in a country that's always rainy and always cold.
Hey, look, young man, I sell you good guns. Yes.
Like the picture that Tommy has up right now, he looks like any guy in fucking Portland. Any guy in Portland.
God,
and now Nelson is definitely not. Well, yeah, you could be any guy in Portland now.
Yeah, no, I can. I just got flannel, and I have a fucking affinity with craft brew, and I could definitely do that. What did I say? I said that fucking IPAs taste like the fucking, what is that shit called again? I can
Potpourri.
Yeah, IPAs taste like ground up potpourri blended with fucking piss.
Get the fuck out of here. IPAs are delicious.
Tommy is much more of a hipster than I am.
No.
Tommy's
Look at
the
him
one
in his
vaping.
rolled fisherman's cap right now.
Tommy's the one vaping and drinking IPA.
Look at his face. He is just
vaping.
realizing this.
Vaping, fucking he's like ripping vape hits and drinking IPAs, wearing skinny jeans and Vans, and it's like, you really need to listen to this band. It's a lot better now than the old stuff's better than the new stuff. But yes.
No, I object to this because I do not think that Tyler be the one who would walk in and look at the women in the crowd and say, "Have you read Theory?" like directly to their faces.
Tyler definitely would not.
No, I'd be like, have you ever smoked crack? Would be my first question.
This is why we need to have the Ask Tyler Anything episode.
Yes, we're definitely gonna do that.
Or we should just do a couple episodes where I just print out some theory and I read it. This is like in audiobook form.
We should totally do audio with Tyler reading Theory. Would be the greatest thing ever.
like rewritten out the way that you wrote the cookbook, like your version of it.
This is
in your voice.
This book is gonna be Das Kapital.
This is dang old State and Revolution, man, by Vladimir Lenin.
Wait a minute, Tyler. Do you pronounce Italian? Like that is
Italian, yeah, the Italian dressing.
Italian dressing.
I still can't get over like 18-year-old me just staring at Tommy.
It's just real hard, right in his face.
Yeah, like your period.
God, I would.
You look extremely racist in that picture.
But this thing is, I would give anything to look like that again. I'm not gonna lie. It's never gonna happen.
Really?
You see
like
what happens if you were ever like attractive as like a young adult, and then you age and you come out of that attractiveness and then you pine for it for the rest of your life. That's what happens for people who were never attractive. We never have to deal with that shit. We get to be ugly forever.
I had 3 years in high school of attractiveness, and the second I got into college, this is what I look like.
Oh shit, I have emotions and I'm gonna eat all of them.
I don't know how to socialize normally.
This looks like the hottest Christian album, like it's about to drop.
You are the guy that sings
you're
the guy that sings the songs that sound like love songs, like romance songs, but they're all about God.
They're for Jesus. Yeah.
Oh my God.
It's so awkward.
Yeah.
That guy goes to Reliant K concerts.
Yeah.
6 feet from the edge, and I'm thinking maybe 6 feet ain't so far down.
It comes a time in the show where we got to ask ourselves: are we doing the fans a service right now, or are we doing them a disservice? So
The whole podcast is a fucking disservice.
The thing is, I came in here thinking like, oh, well, we should like modify the podcast, make it sound more professional. And then I talked to other fans, and they're like, no, we love it being disorganized like that.
No, I
fucking
love.
wreck.
I'm not gonna lie, I love the fucking gaps and the bullshit and just everything. I feel I want to make it so like people feel like they're in the room with us, even though we're not in the room with each other.
well, when all this COVID shit's over, we should take it on the road.
I told you guys are coming to England.
Yep, we're driving across the sea.
We're driving across the sea to England.
Like,
Yeah, I can still walk into pharmacies and get like fucking like mild opiates, can I?
in England?
Yeah.
No.
Oh.
If you can, I am surprised because I've been given so many shit painkillers over here.
Oh,
Well, maybe that's France.
Well, I mean, you could still like if you need a prescription to get something with like codeine in it. So
I mean, we can always go to Amsterdam.
it is a ferry ride away.
Oh, Lord, here we go.
I'm seriously, I'm hoping that international travel will at least be open by the fall.
Yes.
Because right now it's still not open in the UK.
We're going to
And
Florida.
I need to go see my family. So
No,
either
we're all-
I'm coming to see you guys or y'all are coming to Florida.
We're all going to Florida. We're going to hang out with you and the Radicalizing Rednecks podcast, Uncle Big Tim and company. And we're going to go to the strip clubs with the really good steaks.
or the shitty one that's on I-75.
Hell yeah. All right, now that we've completely gone off the rails when it comes to the Sharecroppers Union, anyone listening, please get a copy of Hammer and Hoe. There is a free PDF version that Robin Kelly is cool with, and I'll get the link and I'll post it in the show notes. This has been an episode that I wanted to do for a really long time, and I hope people like it, and I hope it's brought to light a section of Alabama's history that needs to be talked about. Because, like I said in the intro, Yankee liberals singing the South is racist backwater, and sharecroppers with guns proving them otherwise. Oh man, Kai, I didn't mean to pan Indian you like you said. I had a moment of weakness there, and I'm self-critting, and I'm sorry. I had a moment of chauvinism and weakness. I'm sorry. I'm trying to strangle it out of me.
This picture of you in a white t-shirt. Lounging on the side of the ocean.
Y'all want to know what pants?
This is the guy that pan Indians.
Do y'all want to know what? No, I'm gonna make it worse. I'm gonna make it worse in 5 seconds. You want to know what pants I'm wearing
right now?
No, in that picture.
Well,
I would say like Madra's check, but that seems too far for you.
Cargo pants.
Yep, I'm wearing camouflage cargo pants.
Yep. I remember Nelson in his cargo pants days. Those are some good old white boy days.
That's just a colorized picture of Christopher Columbus looking at what he thinks to be India.
Oh my fucking God.
He's like, I can't wait to take these natives back to the Queen.
It's an America.
This is what I have to deal with on every fucking episode. Oh my God. I wouldn't have it any other way.
It's just the Christ in me. It's just the Christ in me.
I feel you.
Sadie Hawkins dance. That guy has Sadie Hawkins dance in his head right now.
Oh my God. No, I probably had Green Day's American Idiot in my head. Oh my God.
Oh, you were that kid.
Yes, he was. Yes.
Hell yeah. I had a burned copy of it. I would listen to my Walkman in my room, a fucking burned CD copy of it. And on the song Holiday skipped at the very end, so I never got to get that good flow into Boulevard of Broken Dreams.
Just stop. Ugh.
Nah, see, I was a couple years older than you, and I was the one who was like, I don't like Green Day now that they're all wearing red and black, and like, come on, they don't sound like they're like Nimrod days.
Oh yeah, Dookie and Nimrod.
That was me.
Dookie and Nimrod was so much better. I remember freshman year of high school dressing up like Green Day to go to homecoming. With everyone wanted to wear the button-down black shirt and the red tie and Converses, and thinking that they were cool.
Nelson, end this episode, please.
Yeah, my headphones are down.
I think I have a picture of that.
Oh God! All right.
Nelson, end this episode, please.
At Dixieland, the proletariat, we believe the South will rise again, but this time for the right reasons, those being worker-owned means of production, decolonization, and self-determination of all oppressed peoples. Make sure to like, follow, and subscribe to us on social media at Dixie Prole. We are coming to you from the birthplace of the Civil Rights Movement, Montgomery, Alabama, as well as the not-so-racist, but really is United Kingdom. We'd also like to recognize that we're recording on occupied land that rightfully belongs to the Muskogee Nation. As always, read Hammer and Hoe. And without further ado, Tyler, sign us off.
Well, good Lord willing, the creek don't rise. We'll see y'all next time.